Hi lovelies! Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Maria and today's video is going to be kind of the first in a bit of a series that I'm thinking of starting, and it's my read it or get rid of it series. And basically what I'm going to be doing is just looking at some of my oldest physical TBR books which I picked out in a recent Do Bookish Things with me. I'll link that video in the description below if you do want to watch that, but I basically went through my physical TBR and picked out some books that I've had on there just for a really long time, and they're books that I just want to read, or if I don't like them or if I'm just not feeling them by the end of this year or within kind of the next 6 months, I'm probably going to let them go because they're obviously just not books for me. I'm maybe just not interested in them anymore, and there's no point in them sitting on my shelves and not being read. So yeah, basically just going to be trying to make sure that I'm picking from this shelf each month when I'm picking my TBR, and decided to put them on their own shelf so that I'm not forgetting about them on my big main shelf with all of my TBR on there, because that's what's been happening over the past couple of years. They've been on there and just slowly gathering dust, and I just forget about them because they're in the back or whatever it may be. So having them here front and center just reminds me that I have them and that I need to pick them up. So it's the last week in August now and I'm just not feeling any of my TBR that I have. I could probably finish the TBR that I have for August, but I'm just not feeling them at the moment. Most of them are pretty high fantasy and quite thick, and I'm just not feeling that right now. So decided to maybe take this week to kick off my read it or get rid of it series, and we'll try and read as many books from the shelf this week. Probably going to be 2 or 3 depending on what ones I pick, and I'm just going to use a number generator to pick because I think I just have choice fatigue right now and I just don't know what to choose. So I'm going to use a number generator to pick the books, but that's basically what we're going to be doing this week. So let's go ahead and get a number generator up and we'll pick our first book. Okay, so I've got 9 books on this shelf. You probably can't see, but I will insert a little clip of all of the books that I've got on there. So I've got things like These Violent Delights, This Vicious Grace, The Darkening, Shatter Me, just quite a few books on there that I've had for a little while. So as I say, I've got 9 books on the shelf at the moment, so just going to set the generator for 9 books and see what number we end up getting. Oh, okay, number 1. We ended up getting number 1. So the first one on here is, actually this is quite fortuitous because this is probably the oldest one on my TBR, so I'll just move over a little bit. So number 1 is actually These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong, and this has been on my TBR for such a long time. I got a really good deal with this one and the second book on Vinted. They had the signed Waterstones editions and they were going pretty cheaply, so ended up buying both of them. I also have the kind of follow-on series to this series as well, and I haven't even read the first book yet, so this is probably one of the high ticket priority items that I had on this list, so it's really good that we're starting with this one. All I know about this one is I believe it's set in the 1920s or something like that in Shanghai, and it's a loose retelling of Romeo and Juliet. I think that's kind of the basis of the story. We've got these 2 rival gang families who are fighting for kind of territory and dominance within the town, and I'm guessing the heirs of the 2 gang factions are going to be Juliet, and I think it's Roma in this one. Yeah, so Roma Montagov and Juliet Sai, I believe. So yeah, loosely based on Romeo and Juliet, 2 warring kind of gang families within here, so wondering if this is going to kind of be a lovers to enemies to lovers or something like that, but heard some mixed things about this one, and that's kind of what's put me off picking this one up sooner. Some people I know have really liked it, other people I know have really not liked it, so I'm not really sure where this one's going to land for me, but as I say, it's one of the oldest ones in my TBR, so I'm actually really happy that we've ended up starting with this one, and I am excited. I'm excited to jump into this one, going in with a complete open mind, not going in with any kind of preconceived ideas of this, so I'll be really intrigued to see what I think about it. But yeah, so that's the first book. I'll probably wait until I finished this one before I pick my next one because quite honestly I'm just in a bit of a reading mood this week, so I'll just wait and see once I finish this one, see what the number generator gives us, and hopefully it's another one that I'm in the mood for. But I'm definitely in the mood for this one. I'm really excited to pick this one up, so I'll probably jump on once I'm around 25 to 30% into this, give you my initial thoughts and feelings and how I'm liking it or if I'm not liking it. But yeah, let's jump into the first read. Hi lovelies, so it is a bit later now and I've managed to get to around 25% into this one, and so far I'm really liking it. I think the first couple of chapters were a little bit hard for me to get into. I wasn't too sure if I was going to be interested in this. It's an urban fantasy, which I do find I'm not as immediately hooked with those usually. It's not my kind of main genre that I would reach towards, but the fact that this is set in the 1920s in Shanghai is definitely helping because it's a bit more of then a historical fantasy for me. So after the first few chapters I was definitely intrigued. Within this one we're kind of following, as I say, the 2 gang member families families that have kind of been at loggerheads for quite some time. They're obviously very much encapsulating that Montague and Capulet set up from the Romeo and Juliet retelling. So warring families vying for territory, because basically in Shanghai at this time there's a lot of Western influence there. Armies coming over from, England, France and Japan, and they're basically vying for any Chinese land. They want to have ownership of it. So that's kind of why the gangs have kind of broke out, because they want to be able to cover that land, and obviously whoever owns the most territory is going to be coming out on the top. So there's been a bit of a feud with them for quite a while. There's been obviously attacks from each of their families to the other. Juliet within here is the heir to the Scarlet Gang, and Roma is the heir to the White Flowers. So obviously they're on opposite sides. They're both heirs to their respective families, and up to now we've got a little bit of history with them in terms of there seems to have been something that happened with them 4 years ago. I don't want to say what because it's a kind of minor spoiler. It's maybe set out within the synopsis, but I like to give as little detail as possible. But basically 4 years prior, something happened that kind of set the two apart, and they basically haven't spoken since then because Juliet was carted off to New York for her safety. She's now back trying to kind of work her way back in as the heir of her faction, and basically within Shanghai there's a bit of a mystery going on. There seems to be whispers of this monster that's going around, and members of the gangs have been affected by this monster, which is basically making some of their gang members end up taking their own lives. And obviously this isn't going to fare well for the gangs because you've got safety in numbers and power in numbers. So both sides are really interested in trying to figure out what is happening within this city. And at this point where I'm at the moment, they're kind of reluctantly, not almost allying with each other, they're just trying to gather information together to see what is happening with this monster. And I'm guessing the story is going to go from here. You can already tell there's a lot of angst and animosity within them. They're proper enemies. There's really high stakes in here, really big things that happened between them. It's not just a case of someone said something quite mean. There is proper stakes within here. So I think I will enjoy their dynamic as we go on in the story. As I say, they've only just really interacted within the story now, so haven't really got much of that, but I think their interactions are going to be quite explosive and probably quite angst filled, tension filled because of those stakes in the background. But so far really liking the writing. I'm liking all of the side characters we're getting introduced to. As I say, there's quite a lot of power struggles and power plays even within their own factions. Cousins potentially wanting to vie for their right to be the heir because they're a male, and just a lot of political machinations even within the gang. Never mind the kind of territory war that's going on with some of the Western factions that have come over and are influencing Shanghai at this time. So really enjoying that. It's definitely adding a layer of richness to the world building that's going on here. And as I say, pretty high stakes with this one. So far it's been pretty fast paced. The first couple of chapters were a little bit slower, just building up where we are in the world. But from then it has been pretty fast paced, I would say. So intrigued to see where this goes. Really liking the writing style. And I'll probably come back in when I'm at around 60% because hopefully we'll get into the meat of the story. I do think we've basically just had the introduction at this point. Obviously I am only 25% into this one, but hoping that over the next kind of few chapters and by around that 60 to 70% point I should have a bit more of an idea of where the story's going and be able to give you a bit more of a deep opinion on this one. But yeah, gonna read a bit more today. I'm reading it pretty quickly, so hopefully we'll be able to get a good bit read today, and I'll jump back on once I've got to around that 60% mark and give you an update. Hi lovelies, so I'm around 70% into this one and I am still enjoying it, but it's one of those books that, when you have books where you don't feel like you're reading, you feel like you're completely immersed. This is kind of the opposite to that. I do know that I'm reading this one and I feel like I'm reading this one when I'm reading it. However, I am enjoying it. I do like the writing style, and when I'm actually reading it, I am enjoying it, but it's not one of those books that's kind of gripping me or pulling me back in. And I think the main reason is that this is much more of a kind of almost mafia gangster style story with a bit of romance in there than a fantasy or anything like that. we are getting a lot of information about this world and kind of the gangsters and the gangs that they're in and kind of the political machinations between them and all of those foreign factions and things like that. But there's nothing really fantasy in here apart from the thing that's kind of the mystery within here about the gang members who are getting killed or, you know, kind of succumbing to this madness that they're talking about in here. So I think it's just a personal preference thing, 'cause I'm not a huge lover of stories about gangs and things like that. It's just not my thing. So I think if this had a bit more of a fantastical element to it, I'd probably enjoy it more. But at the minute, just because that does seem to be the main kind of plot point in here, it's about these gangs, it's just not really gripping me the way I thought it would. What I am liking, however, is the characters in here. I am liking the characterization of both Roma and Juliet and kind of digging a little bit deeper into why they are the way they are and kind of where they have come from and getting little glimpses into their past as well. But I'm also enjoying the side characters in here. We are getting a good bit from them as well and kind of paragraphs here and there from their perspective, and I definitely feel like they're building up to whole characters. There's some of them I would like a little bit more about. I'm not sure if that's intentional that we're not getting as much about them as the others, but the side characters are definitely adding to this. So what I would say is so far it's been a very character driven story. I think the first 25% felt quite fast paced, but since then it has felt quite slow paced, but not necessarily in a bad way. We have very much just been exploring these characters and their relationships, their dynamics within the gangs with each other, and you can kind of feel the tensions building between them and between those gangs. And as I say, when I'm reading it, I am enjoying it, but it's not the type of book that I'm rushing to get back to or that's completely engrossing me when I'm reading it. So take from that what you will. I do think it's a personal preference thing. I don't think it's a case of this book being a bad book or anything, because I will say I'm really enjoying the writing style, and I believe this was a debut novel as well from Chloe Gong, and it's quite impressive, especially because it is a debut. The writing has been really lovely in here, so this is definitely very much a personal preference thing in terms of my enjoyment levels of this one, and not so much a criticism on this book, if that makes sense. So I'm going to finish this up now. I've not got too much left. I should hopefully be able to finish this within today, and then we'll be picking the next book that I'll be picking up from my shelf. So we'll see how the last 30% goes. Things may change. We may get a bit more from that kind of fantastical element, but so far this is probably sitting at around a 3.5 for me, because as I say, it's a well written book. I can definitely see why people would love this one, and it's just maybe a bit more personal preference for me, so I can't really rate it any higher because my ratings do very much go by my enjoyment, and at the minute I'm just not enjoying this as much as I thought I would. So around 3.5, but we'll see if the last 30% changes that at all. Hi lovelies, so it's a little later now and I have now finished These Violent Delights, and I actually really enjoyed the end bit of this one. I think the middle did lag a little bit for me, but the end really picked up again, and I just really enjoyed it a lot more than I had been enjoying kind of the middle. I'd say between 30 to 70%. Felt a little bit slow, felt like the mystery was being kind of dragged out a little bit. I think we could have done with maybe a few side plots or something like that, which I had kind of thought we'd get with some of the side characters, but we didn't really delve into any of those. It was very much about this mystery that was a central plot, as well as kind of the romance between Roma and Juliet as well, and it just meant that the middle part of this felt a little bit slow, but as I say, the end definitely picked up, so ended up on a 4-star for this one. I definitely think you'll like this. If you like anything surrounding gangs and rivalries and forbidden love or anything like that, I definitely think that this hit those markers really, really well. I think both Juliet and Roma were quite complex characters. You knew kind of that you were supposed to root for them because they're the main character, but they could be pretty messy at times, and there were times that you couldn't really root for what they were doing or their motives, and I think Chloe definitely got me with a few of the things that were done in there and kind of twists and things like that. So I have to say this was a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of a thriller, and she definitely got me at the end here. I feel like she built a world that was so full of tension that you really felt the stakes within here. They felt really high. They definitely felt like, even though this is a YA read, it felt like the stakes were real, and because of that you couldn't really guess where some of the narrative was going to go. I was thinking it was a little bit predictable up until that kind of 70 to 80% mark, and then from 80 to 100% it did kind of take that feeling away from me. So really enjoyed that last bit. Definitely made me very intrigued for the sequel, and overall I just think I really liked the writing side of this. I think it was very lyrical and poetic at times, and definitely felt like it was mirroring that kind of noir 1920s Shanghai vibe, so it definitely made me immerse myself within this world, and I could feel that atmosphere around it. because of the writing. And I do think that the world building around kind of these gangs was pretty unique for a YA fantasy. I think it was pretty rich, even though the fantasy element of it was pretty minimal. I do think that the world building in here was still pretty rich in terms of how these people have been living and kind of setting the scene for this. But yeah, I just think this was a really good, solid YA fantasy. I think if you're looking for the fantasy plot to be quite intense, you're probably not going to get it with this. It is much more about those gangs, but considering this was a debut, I think it was done really, really well and quite refreshing in terms of its unique take and kind of the retelling that was done here. So overall, end up on 4 stars for this one and definitely intrigued to read the sequel. Okay, so we're just sitting back because I do now have to get up a number generator and try and pick our next read. So obviously we've only got 8 books now, so I just need to change the generator so that it's showing 8 and then we'll see what number it brings up. Oh, okay, so it's brought up number 8. That's so funny. The first one we got 1, now we've got 8, so let's see what that is. Oh, okay, so it's King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett Sinclair. So this one again has been on my TBR for a little while. I believe it's a retelling of Adrian and Isolde. I'm not too sure on the lore around that one. I'm sure I probably watched the movie when I was younger, but I can't remember the details. It's not one that's really stuck with me, so not really sure what to expect from this one. But I believe this does also have some vampire lore in here. I believe that Isolde within here is sent to the court of Adrian and she's supposed to kill him. I imagine she's not going to want to do that. I imagine there's going to be something that's going to hold her back. They're probably going to get close. Their relationship's going to grow. Guessing the story's going to go from there, but haven't really seen many people talk about this one. But I think it's going to be probably a fun romantasy read, probably a little bit dark in its tone, but from what I've read from Scarlett Sinclair before, that's kind of what she does. It's very dark, it's usually a bit of a gritty setting, usually quite a romance heavy read, so pretty happy with that considering the last book that I read, it was a lot more character driven. There wasn't really obviously a lot of romance in there. It was part of the plot, but it wasn't a heavy romance read. It was much more about the mystery that was going on, so probably a good time to pick up something like this. And with the vampire lore, obviously we're coming into autumn, it's a perfect time to pick up some vampire reads, so pretty happy with that, pretty happy with this one, pretty happy with this choice actually. I've read quite a few from Scarlett Sinclair before and have really enjoyed her writing, so hopefully I will enjoy this one as well. But yeah, that's the next book that we're going to be reading, so probably just start this evening, see how far I can get. It doesn't look like it's too long, but I think it's a good 370 pages or something like that, so under 400 pages for me is typically a shorter book, so I don't think it'll take me too long to get through, but I will be starting tonight, see how much I can get through, and then I'll probably come on tomorrow morning and give you a quick update. Okay, so I come bearing updates and unfortunately it's not the best of updates because I am going to DNF King of Battle and Blood. I'm around 45% into this one, and quite honestly I just think I'm not the target audience for this. I don't think I really had read up about this one to see what this one was actually about or kind of what the context of this one was going to be. And let's just say at 45% all we've really got is spice in this, so unfortunately I just think I'm not the target audience for this one. But in terms of the plot that's kind of surrounding this one, we have these 9 different houses within this kingdom that are kind of trying to protect themselves from being taken over from the Blood King, who is the vampire king within this world, obviously the most powerful. And in order to try and kind of broker peace, the king of the kingdom of Lara, where Isolde is from, is trying to work with the Blood King to have some sort of pact, you know, to make his kingdom's future brighter and to protect his people. So he invites the Blood King to his palace at the start of this story to try and do that. When the Blood King, who is Adrian, ends up getting to the palace, he sees Isolde and asks for her hand in marriage. There is a bit of uproar about that, you know, the king doesn't want that to happen. There's also a guard who's kind of enamored by Isolde who doesn't want that to happen, but Isolde decides to go ahead with it because she wants to try and protect her people and she wants a better future for them as well. And honestly that's all the plot we've got at this 45 to 50% mark. There's not really much else has happened. They've just been travelling a little bit, and I'd say there's been at least 10 spice scenes within here. There hasn't really been much happening between that. There hasn't been any connection between the characters. I think literally the first spice scene was in chapter 2. So just not to my personal taste, not judging it or anything. I do still think the writing's pretty good in here. I do like Scarlett Sinclair as an author. I've read some of her other books, and I would say even though they're quite spicy, the frequency and kind of the build up to the spice was completely different to this. So I do think it's just a case of I'm not the audience for this one, not a case of it necessarily being a bad book. So I'd say if you are interested in books that do have a higher level of spice in terms of the frequency, then you may enjoy this one, because I do think that it is building up to be quite an interesting fantastical world within here. I was liking kind of the world building that was being done. I just wish we were getting more of that side than the side that we were getting. So I looked up a few reviews just of people who maybe rated this maybe around a 3-star or something like that, just to see what the complaints were, and a lot of it was that just the spice level was too high. So rather than reading something that I know I'm not going to rate very highly just because of my personal taste, I think I'm just going to DNF this one. And it's not all bad news. It does mean I can unhaul this one as well as the sequel to this story, because I had these on my shelves and I bought them because I really liked Scarlett Sinclair's writing in some of her other series, but unfortunately this one's just not for me. So it does mean I'm making some room on my shelves, and that's kind of the whole point of this series, that I'm trying to read books that I've had on there for a really long time to see if there's something I am actually interested in, rather than just letting them sit there and gather dust. So I'm sure there's someone out there that will really enjoy these, and I'll probably put them on Vinted for really cheap, because I think these covers are actually different now. I think they did change the covers, so I'm sure there's someone out there that's looking for these old covers. So I'll probably pop them on Vinted and see if someone wants to take them. If not, they'll be donated to the library, so they won't be going to waste, but unfortunately they're just not for me. So it does mean that we need to pick our next book. So let's go back down to the shelf and get the number generator up, and we'll see what we're going to be reading next. Okay, so we now only have 7 books on the shelf, so I'll just update the number generator to have 7, and let's generate and see what we're going to be reading next. Okay, so number 5, so let me just count and see what that is. Oh, okay, so it's another retelling, funnily enough. This is a Persephone and Hades retelling, and I believe this is YA. I believe it has kind of a feminist twist on this as well, and the third book had actually come out in this, and I do have the special editions of the first and the second book, and I was thinking about trying to buy that third book, but I thought I really need to read this first book before I decide to buy the third book. So it's actually really a good time to read this one, because I think if I like this one, I'll maybe give the third book a chance and buy it while it's still on sale and I can have a full collection, because if I end up really loving this series, I'll want to have the third one that matches this. So yeah, don't really know too much about this one other than it is that retelling. I've had a really good track record with Hades and Persephone retelling, so be really interested to see Bea Fitzgerald's take on that and how she kind of puts her spin on it. So yeah, really excited to pick this one up. So I'll probably jump in once I've read maybe around 30% of this one and give you an update on how I'm feeling. Hi lovelies, so I'm now at around chapter 22 within this one, and that's around 40% into the story. And so far I am liking this one. It's a bit different than I was expecting. It's a bit more lighthearted considering some of the really dark themes that we have in here. Obviously it's Greek mythology and it's definitely leaning into some of the darker themes that we get with the mythology, which I am actually enjoying. I'm enjoying a bit more of the truthful representation of some of that mythology, but overall it's kind of got a bit of a cozy feel, weirdly, just in terms of some of the things that are going on within the book and some of the characterization. So this one, obviously I did say it's a Persephone and Hades retelling, but at the start of this story we've got Kor, who is Persephone, but her name is Kor. That's the name she's given when she's younger, and she's basically been brought up her whole life knowing that she's just essentially being trained to be a good wife, attractive to a husband to come and take her off when she's at that age to marry. She has a complicated relationship with her mother. She does love her, but she can kind of see the faults in what her mother has done to her and kind of conditioning her this way. And when it comes to the point of her being ready to marry, she ends up taking things into her own hands and flitting herself off to the underworld to invoke an ancient kind of magical bond with Hades so that she is protected from the rest of the realm. They're not going to be able to find her there, and she doesn't have to get married. Now obviously this causes a little bit of contention with them at the start, but I will say it was kind of dissipated quite quickly. It didn't really last too long, but I am enjoying kind of the banter between those two. And as I said, it's a lot more lighthearted than I had imagined it would be, so there hasn't been too much tension as such. It's not kind of the enemies to lovers story that you may usually get with this type of story and retelling. There has been a little bit of angst and kind of, you can tell there's maybe a bit of mutual pining there, so I am enjoying it. I would say that I'm not like loving it entirely. It's not going to be like a 5-star for me at this point anyway. But I am still really intrigued to see how this goes, and I have since learned that the books in this series are actually standalones, but guessing they're interconnected within the same kind of Greek mythology world. But it means each book is going to follow different characters and it'll be a different love story in each one. So that's actually kind of good, because I was a bit concerned about starting a new series, but it's actually technically, you could read this as a standalone. You don't need to read it as an entire series. So this will be a complete story for these two anyway. But I'll be interested to see if there's any mystery or anything like that that lingers on that's covered in the next stories. But I think they're just interconnected standalones from what I've read. But yeah, so far so good. I am liking the writing style. I do think, because it's a YA, but it's also got the dark themes, it is a little bit jarring sometimes when some of those darker themes come in. But with the style of the writing in here being so YA, I am finding that a little bit jarring, as usually it's one or the other, but not taking away from my enjoyment too much. And as I say, it just has an almost light-hearted, cozy feel to it, just with a bit of a dark undercurrent there. So reading through it quite quickly. Might actually try and finish this between today and tomorrow. Today is Friday. I am going to get my nails done later, and then tomorrow I am going out for a while, but hoping in between that I'll be able to get a good bit of this read, and I'll probably not come on until I've finished it and just give you my final thoughts and updates, because there's not really a lot of plot happening in here. There are some things happening, but I'm not sure what's spoilers in here, because the synopsis of it doesn't really give you too much apart from the first kind of introduction, so I don't want to give too much away of the plot in case it is technically a spoiler. But yeah, enjoying this so far. Probably going to try and read a good bit tonight and tomorrow and get this one finished, and I'll jump back on once I finish this one and give you my final thoughts and feelings. Hi lovelies, so I'm around 60% into Girl, Goddess, Queen, and I'm going to be entirely honest, I'm a little bit bored. I'm a little bit bored of this one. I don't think it's necessarily anything bad, I'm just not that invested in it. It's not really doing anything new with the retelling, it's not really doing anything new with the kind of tropes that we usually get with this. A lot of what this one was kind of pitched to be was a feminist retelling, you know, F the patriarchy and all that type of thing, and I can kind of see where it's going with that. But our main character, obviously Persephone, is kind of coming across a little bit more entitled at some points, rather than kind of being this oppressed figure, which was kind of made clear at the start of the story. She was a little bit oppressed in terms of her mother kind of conditioning her for certain things, and the way the world works being a certain way for men and different for women, and I could kind of see that messaging, but it's almost been a bit too heavy-handed, where I prefer for it to be a little bit more nuanced and a little bit, oh, we've got Frank, a little bit more woven into the story, rather than it just being kind of a, we're going to get a lot of pug noises now. Rather than it just being kind of slapped right in your face, you know, this is a story about patriarchy and trying to change that and taking your power into your own hands. I don't know if it's done in that way because it is YA. Obviously, in an adult novel or something like that, you can probably expect it to be a bit more nuanced and you can kind of read between the lines, whereas you want to get in on the action? Whereas with YA, obviously, it's targeted at a slightly younger audience and you may need to be a little bit more forward in terms of what you're trying to say. So I can kind of see maybe that's why it's been done that way. And I think just as an adult reading it, obviously it's going to hit slightly differently than it would if I was younger. So not taking anything away from it for that, because obviously it is a YA book, so I can't complain about it sounding YA or reading YA when that's exactly what it is. But it just means that my enjoyment levels are slightly different than they probably would be if this was targeted more at an adult audience. So just means, yeah, at the minute I'm a little bit bored because there's nothing really happening, to be quite honest, at the 60% mark. It's kind of still the same premise that was set out at the very start of the story. There's a lot of scenes that are just kind of filler or fluff. As I say, it does have a kind of cozy feel, so if you're looking for something that is a little bit cozy, a bit slower paced probably as well, and if you do like YA stories, then this is probably going to be a really good one. I have like the banter between the characters. I kind of like the very quick-witted writing. It is very modern writing as well in terms of the dialogue and everything like that. So again, that's probably not a preference for me. It's probably, I prefer to be a bit more lyrical and things like that. So it could just be a personal preference. Okay, he's wanting snuggle, so I'm going to have to wrap this up, but I think that's probably why I'm just not enjoying it as much. And it's okay, so between him getting comfy, I've lost track of what I was saying, but yeah, essentially at the minute I am feeling a little bit bored. It's feeling a little bit slow. I probably am going to try and finish it and get to the end and see if anything happens within this last kind of 40%, because maybe there'll be something in there that will change it for me. But it's just the type of book that if I put it down now, I'd probably forget about it. But I don't want to DNF it. I think it is still good. I am liking the writing style, and I do think if you enjoy a YA story, you could probably enjoy this one as well. I think the banter's been pretty fun, but there's just a lot of fluff in there, a lot of filler. I don't think it was intended to be a cozy read, but that's kind of how it's coming off for me. So take all of that with a pinch of salt. As I say, it is a book that is directed at a YA audience, so that could be impacting my enjoyment level of it. But as I say, I have to be completely honest and say that I am a little bit bored at the moment. So Going to continue reading it now, hopefully get it finished kind of between this evening and tomorrow. It is Saturday, it's a very rainy evening, so I'm probably just going to be sitting here reading for most of the night. So if I don't get it finished tonight, I'll probably be able to finish it tomorrow, and I'll come on and give you my final thoughts and feelings. But as it stands at the moment, I would probably rate it about a 3-star, but do take that with a pinch of salt, because as I say, I do think the fact that it's a YA novel and it's reading very YA is part of the reason that I'm not enjoying it as much as I would. So I hate to kind of critique a book like that when I know a lot of the reason I'm not enjoying it is because it's YA. That is the intended audience, so a bit of a tricky one for me to rate. I probably will bump it up a little bit. Objectively, it's a pretty well written book, you know, the dialogue and the banter and everything has been good, but subjectively, in terms of my enjoyment, it's not really hitting the mark. Yeah, bit of a tricky one for me, but I'm going to continue reading it, see how I get on with the next 40%, and as I say, I'll jump on and give you an update once I'm finished. Hi lovelies! So I have now finished Girl, Goddess, Queen, and this was just a bit of a mid book for me. I'm not obsessed with it, but I definitely don't think it was a bad book in any way. But I know it's a book that I'll not really think about. It's probably a little bit forgettable for me, and just not one that really gripped me in any way, unfortunately. But I will say one of the strengths of this book was definitely the tone throughout it. I would actually be very interested to read if Bea Fitzgerald ever does like a contemporary romance, because it's definitely had kind of that rom-com feel. It was quite light and airy at times. The banter was really good. It seemed like the relationship between Persephone and Hades was a bit more grounded rather than the kind of over dramatised renditions that we do sometimes see. So I did like that aspect of it, but I'm just not sure it fitted with their story, and for that reason I just think it felt a little bit meh, a little bit mid for me, and just didn't quite grip me the way I would have expected. And I think because it is supposed to be a mythological retelling, I think I had certain expectations about how this one would go, and because I think it kind of straddled those two genres, so kind of that rom-com with the mythological retelling, I just don't think it kind of meshed as well as I would have liked. But as I say, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy the writing, it just felt a little bit mid for me because of that. I also thought that the kind of feminist injection in this was just a little bit too heavy-handed. I get the messaging that she was trying to convey, but it just felt like it was very in your face, very obvious. It also didn't really paint the main character in the best light. I feel like she had to be almost entitled or aggravating to get what she wanted or to be able to convey how she felt, and I just don't think it was done in the best way. I know that there's books about female rage and things like that, and that's not quite what this was. So it did just mean that the payoff from that feminist kind of taking back her own power and taking back her own identity didn't really again land the way I would have expected. But what I will say is it's still a very fun and accessible retelling, so if this is kind of your first retelling for Hades and Persephone, you might like this one, because for me it was nothing new. I've seen a lot of what was in here before, and it was actually lacking some of the stuff that I've liked in some of the other retellings I've seen as well. So if you're new to the retelling genre, you may actually like this one, because I do think it was very accessible. It gave you some information about some of the other gods as well, and overall it was a fun read, but just not one I'm going to be talking about in a few months' time. But again, if you're a huge fan of contemporary romance, you're a huge fan of more contemporary leaning genres, this may hit better for you. It may just be a personal preference in terms of the way the story was told rather than actual contents in here, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. I know I was saying before that I thought it was because it was YA, but when I compare this to These Violent Delights, which is also YA from my understanding, or it may be adult, maybe I've got that wrong, but just for me, I still just think the world building and kind of the depth of the character in here just wasn't rich enough for me to enjoy the story the way I would like to. So I'm not sure if that's skewing my view of this one, so take everything I'm saying with a pinch of salt in case that is what's going on with this one. But I would probably rate this one around a 3.5 because I think it was well written. Objectively it's a good book, but subjectively it just didn't hit for me. But it does mean that I probably will unhaul this copy and the copy of book 2 because I'm not really interested in reading book 2 after reading this one. It's definitely not high on my priority, and it's just going to sit in that shelf for a really long time, so I'll probably unhaul these versions, and if I ever want to read it I can read it on my Kindle. So that's it, that's everything I'm reading this week. I think we've had probably a bit of an underwhelming week of reading. I think apart from These Violent Delights, the rest of them just didn't really hit for me, but the more I've kind of thought and sat on These Violent Delights, I think I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the world building, and I am actually really anticipating the second book, so I'm hoping to try and fit that into September because I do really want to know what happens in that one. So it's always a really good sign when you're thinking about a book for a few days after. It's a good sign that you did really enjoy it. So I probably enjoyed that one more than I felt like I enjoyed it at the time. Unfortunately, the other couple, King of Bottle and Blood and Girl Goddess Queen, didn't quite hit the mark for me, but again, I don't think it was actually that either of them were bad books. I think it's just poor choices on my part for books that I thought I would enjoy but just didn't hit the mark for me. So either way, I think it's been a success because I've been able to get 4 books off my shelves that I've had on there for quite a long time. 3 of them, or actually 4 of them, because I probably will get the second book, and this one will be unhauled. So again, it's making space in my shelves, and that is the whole point of doing this, is to try and read these books and hopefully love them. But if I don't, I can make space for new books in my collection and get these to people who will actually enjoy them, whether that's through the library or Vinted or whatever that may be. But really happy with the progress I made in that and excited to move on with some of the next books on that shelf. It's definitely motivated me to start reading some of these. But yeah, let me know if you've read any of those, if you've enjoyed them, if you didn't enjoy them, if you agree with my thoughts on those. I'd definitely like to know all your thoughts and feelings in the comments below, and let me know what the oldest book on your TBR is as well, and when you plan to read it. Or if you don't have anything to comment, just put a little book emoji to let me know that you got to the end. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week, and it's videos like this, so reading vlogs, TBR jars, book shopping, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!